All right, we're going to look at Shakespeare's play Measure for Measure now, and with this something that doesn't really fit the traditional genres, or at least the breakdown of them. So if you look at your editions of Shakespeare, mine is divided into comedies, histories, tragedies, and romances. And then I've got poems in the back because this is the complete works of Shakespeare I have. But in terms of the dramas, comedies, histories, tragedies, and romances. And I said to you that chronologically speaking, that's the order in which they're presented. So there are periods in which Shakespeare writes a type of, he seems extremely interested in types of literature, and the comedies are the first genre that we're looking at. So a Midsummer Night's Dream is the first comedy, and the second we're going to look at is Measure for Measure. It's placed at the end of the comedies, at least in the edition I'm using here, which is not what did I recommend it to you, this one, The Riverside. I think all of them are pretty much like this. They stick it at the end, and that's because it's that close to a tragedy, really. It pushes, it's darker. It veers in the direction of being a tragedy, very close to it. It's a dark comedy. Yeah, it's probably a comedy because it concludes with the prospect of a marriage, but it's not a very funny play, and it's not even very uplifting in some ways, like a comedy would be. Midsummer Night's Dream is pretty festive. Some other comedies are very light, cheerful, humorous. This is classified as a comedy because of the ending, but it is very much of a problem play. So they put it under the comedies because where does it fit? You could fit it as miscellaneous. It doesn't fit any of these categories, but it's called a comedy. He wrote this at the time he was writing the tragedies as well. 1604, same year as Othello. So in the very late tragic period, he writes Measure for Measure. And in it, he is dealing with the destructive forces of Eros, love, the passions, the same subject that Virgil writes on in the Aeneid, in the destruction of Dido. She is ruled by Cupid's arrow, and Eros, Venus, just brings her down to the underworld in an untimely death. Now, the source for this story is an Italian story by a writer by the name of Cinthio, pronouncing it in my terrible Italian, but with a ch because it's a CI. The Hecatomiti, the 100 stories. I'm not Hecatomiti. I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing this correctly. In the original, the Duke in Vienna obtains a surrogate ruler whose name is Angelo, renowned for his virtue. And Claudio and Juliet, two of his characters, consummate their love before their marriage. Claudio sentenced to death by Angelo, who is then seduced by Isabella. Isabella, who refuses to satisfy his desires. Now, Shakespeare departs from his source by the fact that Isabella in the original does assent to Angelo's desire. She gives in. She gives up her virtue for her brother's life. The title of the work is interesting. It's from the Sermon on the Mount. Let's see. Matthew 7. You can see that? You can see that. Oh dear. Judge not that ye be not judged, for with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. And with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you again. Measure for measure. So it's a reference to this passage on judgment from the Sermon on the Mount. And it is a play then about justice and also about desire and about the law and about civic society. And many of the ideas in the play, in fact, the explicit references are taken directly from Scripture, which is also very interesting. And we'll pick up those as we read this. You'll see explicit references to scriptural ideas and themes. And one of the background bits of information I need to give you is our understanding of what the law does. Because I think particularly in our day, there's a very limited and unhelpful understanding of the purposes of the law as far as Christians go, other than that we should follow the law. But the law has more than one use, other than it's something we should obey. Romans 13, right? You ought to obey those in authority over you and so forth, because they don't wield the sword in vain, etc. Yes, so there's an appeal to authority, but that's not the only use of the law. That the reformers, and remember in 1604, the ruler of, or the king of England is none other than James, Protestant ruler, very much coming from the Presbyterian camp of things, therefore with a Reformed background behind him. And the Reformed view of the law sees three purposes for the law. And I'm going to give you a little overview of this here to help you think about this, because it does bear on what Shakespeare is doing in his treatment of the law and what the law is supposed to do in the body politic. And the first use of the law, this is the Reformed view, Calvin, also then of the great John Knox and so forth from Scotland. The first purpose of the law is to be a mirror. On the one hand, the law of God reflects and mirrors the perfect righteousness of God. The law tells us much about who God is. Perhaps more important, the law illuminates human sinfulness. So in James, it speaks of the law as something that we look into and then we forget, as if we forget what we look like. That's interesting. Shows us we see it clearly, and then immediately we forget, as if we hadn't seen what we. It's really interesting. Anyway, Augustine writes, the law orders that we, after attempting to do what is ordered, and so feeling our weakness under the law, may learn to implore the help of grace. So we see what we ought to do and then see that we fall short of the law. So the law condemns us, but first of all, it shows us before it condemns us. Say, I don't match up to what I ought to be like. If you want to, define your own human nature, you're left with the problem of, how do I define it? If I'm going to define it, what should I do? Well, you can just decide to do whatever you want, but then you're going to be caught in the problem of you're going to be different than everyone else. So are you the only human being and everyone else is not human because you're following a different pattern than them, or is there something in common? The common view that we're going to hold to, then again, from the humanistic tradition, which Christians agree to, we all have a common human nature, is that the law orders so that we see in the law a reflection of what we ought to be like as human beings. And when we transgress it, we recognize then that we are lawbreakers. And as it says here, again, this is the Christian point of view, the law highlights our weakness so that we might seek the strength found in Christ. So it's like a schoolmaster. It's a teacher. The law is there to teach. Isn't that interesting? First thing the laws of the land are there to do is to teach us what righteousness is. Nobody talks about that anymore. They talk about the law as there to push you, nudge you in the direction that the people in power want you to be nudged. We're going to put up speed cameras to get you to drive at a slower speed than you were. We're going to nudge you in that direction. Is it teaching you? Not really. It's coercing you, but it's not teaching you anything about the nature of righteousness. Does anyone think there's anything more righteous in driving 30 kilometers an hour than 50? Not really. So that idea of the law as a teacher is sort of gone in our contemporary practices. But it wouldn't have been in Shakespeare's day. The laws that the magistrate institutes ought to mirror the righteousness of God, and that's how you know you will have just laws. And you want to have those laws, because just laws will make for a more just commonwealth. So you want good laws, and good laws will then be Christian laws. So the law acts like a severe schoolmaster who drives us to Christ. So it reflects God's righteousness and teaches it to us. So that's the law of God, but also reflected in the positive law. Second purpose is to restrain evil. This is really, really valuable, really, really important. Because the law in Christian teaching can't change people's hearts. And so some Christians say, well, what do we care about the laws? They're not effective anyway in changing people's lives, and all I care about is Christ. So I'm going to ignore the law and not worry about getting caught up in legalistic discussions and so forth, because the law is ineffective in bringing people to faith, which is true. However, the law also restrains evil. And every Christian ought to want to resist evil. Like it says in Scripture, to resist evil, and the devil will flee from you. But if you don't resist evil, guess who's coming to lunch? Right near you. So the law is there to restrain evil. If you don't care about what's happening in the courts of law and aren't involved in this, then you're not interested in restraining evil, in which case don't be surprised when your country becomes more evil. Now, the law in and of itself cannot change human hearts. It can, however, serve to protect the righteous from the unjust. Not just the righteous, but the innocent. It will protect the defenseless. That's why you ought to have laws that protect the innocent, the defenseless, the unborn, the elderly, the mentally ill. You need laws there to protect them. So they're a restraint on evil practices. You can't just do whatever you want with somebody you don't like. Calvin says the purpose is by means of its fearful denunciation and the consequent dread of punishment to curb those who, unless forced, have no regard for rectitude and justice. So if people are suddenly stabbing people in the streets or shooting them or invading their homes or stealing their vehicles, it's because they're not afraid of the law. They need to become afraid. So the punishments have to fit the crimes. So if I'm going to take somebody's life, I have to worry, measure for measure, that my life is at risk if I do that. That's going to stop me at that point. Telling me it's wrong is not going to stop me. They have to be afraid. It's got to restrain evil. Evil understands coercion. The third purpose, this one's really interesting, is to reveal what is pleasing to God. As born again children of God, the law enlightens us as to what is pleasing to our Father, whom we seek to serve. The Christian delights in the law as God himself delights in it. Jesus says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. This is the highest function of the law, to serve as an instrument for the people of God, to give him honor and glory. Note that the third purpose of the law is only for Christians, because only Christians want to please and delight God. The other two are for good for everybody, and everyone benefits from Christian law. Everyone. The third purpose is the hidden one. That is only revealed to Christians. I want to please the lawgiver. So it has a, if you want, a grace element to the law. And again, Paul talks about this in the Romans and elsewhere. You know, if grace doesn't save me, then should I just dispense with the law? God forbid. The law is there to teach me righteousness. The law is there to show me my need for grace. In other words, the law is something that has grace embedded in it. It directs me towards what grace is, and it shows me what grace is because I'm not judged. I'm forgiven, etc. So 3 purposes of the law. You will not hear that in contemporary discourse. Shakespeare will know that. It's in his orbit. It's lots of discussions about this. So I need to give this to any student in the 21st century reading a play written in 1604. You have to have some understanding of the multifarious ways in which the law is understood, even by Christians at the time. And all of them are good. So it's a teacher that points us to Christ. Secondly, it restrains evil. And thirdly, it reveals what is pleasing to God. Now, if you don't have those views in mind and you're a Christian, that you want to get involved in the legal system, then you can come up with any sorts of laws and you will lose sight of those. You want to have all of those there in sight. It's not just what benefits Christians the most or something, some sort of group identity type of thing. That's not going to be very pleasing because everyone, human, bears the image of God and you have to treat them justly as well. Anyway, those there. Any comments or questions before I move forward? Yes.
Just in a practical sense. So, like, just to give you an example, I've been speaking to the mayor of
your local
Rock region.
Okay.
About some of the issues with LGBTQ flags, other things like that are in our town.
Sure, in public places.
Public places.
Sure.
And whatnot. And thankfully, he's been very recipient in the conversation and whatnot. And so, I mean, Lord willing, hopefully
we'll see
some change, so to speak. But in terms of addressing these issues, how would you address these issues with someone who does not adhere to biblical teaching, like a non-Christian?
Like in that particular area, you got to. I actually think introducing the idea of what the law is for is a helpful conversation piece. Right. Like what do laws do? What are they for? And if they're just there as a Foucauldian, as the LGBT crowd thinks, the purpose of the law is to exercise power, because words are violence. And so if you use words that I don't want, I'm going to restrict your speech. And the only way we can bring about a just outcome for oppressed minorities is to celebrate their actions. Then you have a sort of Foucauldian view of language to begin with. And you're not even thinking about the purpose of the law. The purpose of the law is just to conform to Foucault's ideas. That's pretty much it. But how about everybody else? Is everybody LGBT, whatever? You think, well, no, they call themselves a minority for a reason. So how about the majority? Do the majority not have rights? Does the law not there for them as well? They say, no, it's just there to exercise power. Think, well, what a terrible idea of the law that is. If it's just there, if that's the reason, if I buy your logic, then why would I not follow the same logic myself and say, yes, okay, I will accept what you say, and I'm just going to remove every vestige of rights that you have because it's just about the exercise of power. That, quid pro quo. You want it, that, you get it back, right? I don't think anyone wants that view, and I don't think they believe that view necessarily.
Yeah, well, that's what I've gathered with,
they're caught in a bind, like any political figure is going to get mobbed.
Yeah, absolutely.
At that stage. So that's the problem.
Yeah.
And attacked and vilified and accused of phobias and hates, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the point is, this is the public space. It belongs to everybody in the public. We ought to have public symbols and not private group symbols of any sort. Those should not be flown from buildings. Yeah, but we have schools with the pride flags. We have vehicles. We have fire stations. We have police stations, all which show the flag. And I think, but those are public service institutions. Why are they showing anybody's flag? You don't even put up the Leafs flag. Like somebody might on one day, the Leafs ever won something in that impossible scenario in the future, this fantasy land where the Leafs would actually win something, they might plant a Leafs flag temporarily, fly it, but it wouldn't be there like as if it were the national identity issue. And that's the way it is. This is Canadian identity now. So it's very complicated. Yeah. But the law issue is like purpose of why is this legal? It ought to be illegal if it's representing everybody, and the purpose of the law has these ends. So you might want to talk abstractly about these things and then say, okay, what is the law doing here?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point.
It's just a thought.
Yeah.
Yes?
I think
I don't want sharing in the class, by the way, to the point where I can't talk about the class, just about the subject, because I'm yes, make your point. I can't do that. Yes, thank you.
This has kind of illuminated a new way to communicate about law to me, because
this, yeah,
it
was for me. It was illuminatory when I first came across it.
I am a deer hunter.
Okay.
And the Canadian government seeks to restrict my access and ability.
You only shoot so many.
To legally purchase and own a firearm.
Yep.
And the more recent bills that they've been passing have always struck me as unfair. It's been hard to communicate what exactly is unfair about banning one and not another gun.
Yeah, well, those are just bizarre. Yeah.
Comparing it to this standard, that I think what I'm going to communicate is that the laws punish intentionally and exclusively those who are unlawful. While leaving unlawful people no more regulated or punished than before.
Yeah. So then the laws are purposefully unjust.
So it clouds it intentionally clouds and darkens the path of lawfulness and does nothing to discourage the path of unlawfulness. So
the specific fact that you feel, and probably correctly, that you're unjustly discriminated against by the law, nobody is going to care about that but you and your people who are equally discriminated against. But the principle here, they ought to observe, yeah, they do have a problem with that. They should have a problem with the fact that the law seems arbitrary. So it's arbitrary, and it's also vindictive. And so they ought to say, okay, and if we admit that here, then it's going to be a problem in other instances. But they will then go back to the original point, which is it's not about justice, it's about power. Yeah. And really what we're saying is that if a hunter, is unjustly targeted by that, then that's good, because we are actually after you.
But it's actually, even under their own...
It's not about justice, even though Foucault doesn't care about justice.
Even under their own conception, the use of laws or the justice system on that path is self-defeating, because discouraging lawfulness is inherently counter to the very concept of law at all. Like, if one does anything, it should encourage lawfulness.
They don't even care about human nature, truthfully. They don't think that there is such a thing as a common human nature. And so the whole issue is a moot point. It's all about group rights, not about individual rights. There are no individuals in postmodern literary theory. There are only groups.
If words are violent, then violence is no worse than words.
They don't care. It's an irrational system. The play.
Yeah.
This is just the intro to it on the folder. Human nature and the law often collide. I won't even read his take. I've got my own take here. What we're going to notice here in this play is, just like in A Midsummer Night's Dream, we have an orchestrator of the plot, a dramaturge figure. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, it was who? Who is the figure that pulled the strings, orchestrated the plot? Oberon, king of the fairies, a supernatural figure. There were other plays within the plays and other dramaturge figures. There was one that was basically sort of a mirror for Oberon, although a parody is a better description for him. Puck, not Puck, Bottom. Bottom was a dramaturge figure as well. Remember, Bottom led the theater company of the commoners in their play within the play and presented a view of Eros, just like here, gone wrong. Tragic, like Romeo and Juliet, the plot line of Pyramus and Thisbe. Two star-crossed lovers living on the either side of the Trojan wall. One's in Troy, the other's in Greece. One's a Trojan one, the other's a Greek. They see each other through a crack in the wall, and they get out and under the cover of night, confused identity. They think that one has killed one another and that one has died, and then they commit suicide, just like in Romeo and Juliet. So that play within the play, but the bigger dramaturge figure, the one that orchestrates the entire thing, is Oberon. His parallel in this play is Vincentio, the Duke. Oh, we don't even have the cast of characters there. I probably have to go to the, never mind, I won't bother with this. But he is the one whom we meet here at the outset, Vincentio. Now, Vincentio, who orchestrates the whole plot and is a dramaturge figure, has correspondences in other plays that we're going to see as well. I'm not doing Iago, which I would have done in Othello, but he is a figure like this who orchestrates the plot, although I would call him an anti-dramaturge figure because he's a dark and evil character. But we did see him in the play Midsummer Night's Dream, so Oberon, and we will see him in the next play in the form of Prospero in The Tempest. Prospero is a lot more like Oberon, like a character capable of supernatural magic to orchestrate the plot. So this is the reason I say this is a regular figure in Shakespeare's drama, a surrogate for the playwright himself. So a Shakespeare character within the play. And when Shakespeare's then presenting a play to us, he's also talking to us about the influence of the playwright and the importance of the playwright being a moral figure that seeks to bring good events about. So it's also about the role of the teacher in what the teacher presents to the audience and how that teacher's actions then reflect and mirror the divine playwright, God, who also brings justice about and has to mete out just judgments to good and evil characters. The evil characters must be shown to get the consequences of their evil actions. They cannot be rewarded for it. Likewise, the good characters need to be kept from harm and in the end rewarded, and there has to be a happy ending. And the happy ending in a comedy is a marriage, and the happy ending in a tragedy is a lot of deaths of a lot of bad characters. But in each case, the justice of God is vindicated. Now that tight ending is there in a Christian dramatist. It's not there necessarily. In fact, it's not there in the ancient generic forms of tragedies and comedies. Tragedies do not end in the famous Athenian tragedians with the good or the bad characters being killed off and the justice of all things being vindicated. That doesn't happen that way. And the comedies don't end with marriages. They just don't. But they do in Christian representations of the dramas because of Christian theology. Christian theology is going to mirror the book of Revelation and its depiction of how things end. And they will end with judgment on the one hand for Babylon the Great, for all of the malefactors who opposed God's will on the one hand, and on the other hand with a marriage scene for the bride who is the heavenly Jerusalem. That's how the book of Revelation ends. That's reflected in Shakespeare's calibration of the ancient dramatic forms. So Vincentio, as a quasi-Christian duke, is going to orchestrate the plot so that it ends up with justice being done. And he's going to want to do various things with his use of the law then. And one of them, the first one, is to teach. His problem, as we see at the beginning of the play, is that he has been negligent in his duties as the leader of the city here. What's the city again? Vienna. The city of Vienna has gone to seed. It's become licentious. He's allowed brothels to pop up, and he's let them be. The people love him because he lets them do whatever they want. So he's very popular with the people, but he's not thereby a good ruler, despite his popularity. The reason why is because he has a duty as a leader to be a good schoolmaster. He has to acquaint them with who God is. Secondly, he has to restrain evil. He hasn't done that. And thirdly, he hasn't made sure that what is pleasing to God is also recognized in Vienna. So Vincentio, as we meet him at the beginning, is a ruler who has become very deficient or delinquent even in his duties. That's the problem with which the play begins. And it's true to this day that to be popular, you just let people do whatever they want. As a parent as well. Until it gets out of hand, and then everybody blames you because for obvious reason. But if there's no restraint, if you give the kids all the candy that they want and let them stay up as late as they want and do whatever they want with whomever they want, whenever they want, the kids will never object, ever. And if one parent's strict and the other's not, they'll play off the bad guy against the good parent and all that. This is just the order of nature. Nothing new under the sun in that sense here. But this is the problem, is that the Duke has not been strict enough in his rule. And as a result, prostitution has grown rampant, and with that, venereal disease is. So now the population is getting sick because the Duke was unwilling to restrain. So he's been a bad ruler. We begin with a bad ruler. That's what we need to understand here at the outset. And Shakespeare and his audience would recognize the Duke as a bad ruler. So the bad ruler is also a playwright of sorts, and a bad playwright at that. He's not been directing his audience towards justice in his depiction of events. So when we meet him, the Duke has three motives, because it's clear at this point we've come in the middle of his regime, and he's been a Duke for at least 10 years, and he has recognized the error in his ways, and he has three aims that he enunciates very early on in the plot here. First of all, he wants to restore order, because it is chaos, lawless. So he wants to restore order. Secondly, he wants to test and to teach others. And by others, we're going to include all sorts of figures, including the figure he puts in charge, but not just Angelo. All sorts of characters are going to be tested and taught. And then thirdly, and this is interesting, he wants to learn from their mistakes. And act accordingly. The problem is presented in Act 1, Scene 3. Let me see here, right here, if I can get Act 1, Scene 3. Go. Let me come to this, where the Duke is now in disguised as a friar to speak to Friar Thomas, rather. Why I desire thee, says the Duke, to give me secret harbor hath a purpose more grave and wrinkled than the aims and ends of burning youth. May your grace speak of it, because the friar knows that the Duke is the Duke, and he's not just hiding in there. Are you coming here because you can't resist the temptations of the flesh, my son? No, I have a different purpose here. It's not my own lust that leads me to go to a monastery. I'm going here for a different purpose. What's the purpose? May your grace speak of it. My holy sir, none knows better than you how I have ever loved the life removed and held in idle price to haunt assemblies where youth and cost witless bravery keeps. I have delivered to Lord Angelo, a man of stricture and firm abstinence, my absolute power and place here in Vienna, and he supposes me traveled to Poland, and for I have strewed it in the common ear, as in construed it. He has spread the rumor in the common ear that that's where he's gone. He didn't tell the Angelo this, but he will hear it by rumor, and so it is received. He thinks I've gone off to Poland. So in other words, he thinks that he is ruling here in my absence, and that there will be nobody that's going to step in. So he doesn't fear any consequence for whatever he does. You will demand of me why I do this. Gladly, my lord. And now comes the relevant section. We have strict statutes and most biting laws, the needful bits and curbs to headstrong weeds, which for this 14 years we have let slip. He speaks with the royal we here. We as in I, the state. Even like an o'ergrown lion in a cave that goes not out to prey. Now, as fond fathers, having bound up the threatening twigs of birch, so birch with which you would punish transgressions, only to stick it in their children's sight for terror not to use it. In time, the rod becomes more mocked than feared. So our decrees, dead to infliction, to themselves are dead. And liberty plucks justice by the nose. The baby beats the nurse, and quite athwart goes all decorum. So the very thing that I talked about at the outset in the very first lecture when I talked about Shakespeare and the use of harmony and degree, remove but degree, untune that string, and hark what discord soon follows. Echo of that here. So by removing the law, he's removing the ordering of society, and by that showing what good and evil are. They become indistinguishable. They're just equal acts, equally punished, equally rewarded. The strong do what they want, the weak get punished for the transgressions of the strong. And as a consequence of this, the whole of the kingdom has gone into disarray. It's much like we meet in the Odyssey, where Sophocles as well, but in the Odyssey, where Odysseus is remote from his kingdom for over 10 years, and the suitors are coming in and they're eating him out of house and home, and nobody can stop them. There's no law in place. There's nobody that represents the law or who will put in place the law, because the lawgiver, namely the king, is absent. So he's effectively been absent, even though he's been present in person. In mind, he's been absent. He's let things slip, even though he's been in 14 years. I mean, he blames himself. We have the statutes. They're on the books. We have the laws which are most biting. They'll take a chunk out of anyone who transgresses, so they fear him. And these are there, needful, to stop headstrong weeds. He's mixing his metaphors there. The laws like bits, like they're in a horse's bridle to to direct it in the right direction, or like weeds that are going to overcome the good crops in a garden. If you let the weeds grow, they choke out what's healthy and sound. So both of these things combine, and this is his fault. We've let it slip for 14 years, and then brings in a third metaphor, like an overgrown lion in a cave that goes not out for prey, like himself. That's what I've acted like. And now, and fourth comparison, like a fond father who threatens, if you do that, there it is, the birch on the wall. You say it every day, they do it, and you never implement discipline. Eventually, the child looks up at the thing and laughs. Oh, yeah. I was threatened with the wooden spoon as a boy. The Irish weapon par excellence, the wooden spoon. You'll get the wooden spoon. I was terrified of the wooden spoon. I never got the wooden spoon. I lost my fear of the wooden spoon. By the time I got to the point where my mother would have hit me with the wooden spoon, it wouldn't have hurt anyway. She would have broken the wooden spoon and I would have laughed at her. It's true. There's a point when a boy gets a certain size and she says, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. And I think, yeah, it is. Your hand is going to hurt and I'm going to go, whoa. But it's like that. And that's not, yeah. You go through that stage and eventually I remember it saying to my mom, that's not going to work anymore. And she's like, okay, I think that's the end. I didn't say it threateningly. I just said, I'm tired of going along with this game. I feel badly that I'm pretending that this is hurting. And it's just like, it's got to stop. This is silly. Anyway, that's the situation of his own rule. This is his indictment of his own rule and his own actions. But what does he not do? He doesn't himself bring in the laws. The law is still there, but he lets Angelo do it. Now, what is the purpose of that? It's not just to bring in the law, it's also to correct the lack of good leadership that he has himself exhibited. If he comes in and does it and enforces it everywhere, first of all, they'll hate him. Second of all, they'll accuse him of being arbitrary. So yesterday or for 14 years, you did absolutely nothing, and now you're going to act like a tyrant. And what's going to come tomorrow? So we don't trust you. So he's brought in a surrogate to administer the law, somebody who seems to like legalism and like strictness and like purity. The Lord Angelo, he's going to bring in to do this. But as I said to you, his purpose of that is not only to fix the body politic, it's also to help the characters there. And that includes Angelo. Angelo, who's there to bring in the law, is also going to be taught along the way. And the Duke is sitting back, very clever. So he's not just a bad man, not a weak man. He's a negligent man. He's a very thoughtful man, having said that. And he represents a sort of ruler that we're repeatedly going to see in Shakespeare's plays again. I'm going to have to give you a little bit of background here. There are, in accordance with, this is Aristotle. I regularly present this view of Aristotle, that there are two forms of life that are worthy of living. One is the political life, or the vita activa. In Latin, it becomes the very same life that is recognized, the life of the politician, the life of the lawgiver. This is a life worthy of living for any free man. But the second is the bios theoretikos. Theoretikos. And in Latin, the vita contemplativa. The contemplative life, the life of the mind, the life of the philosopher, the life of the theologian. So this is the active life, this is the contemplative life. This is the man of the law, the man of politics, the man of action, the man who does practical things in the public square for the public good. This is the man who thinks and meditates on the good, the true, the beautiful. It's the contemplative sort of individual. So, and this one is the mainstream Greek view. Let me just turn this off for a second so you can see this better. This is the mainstream Greek view. This is the one that gets brought to their attention by Socrates, the second view. And Socrates is so persuasive with the Greeks that Aristotle recognizes it as the life that he lives, by the way, as well. The life of people that are devoted to thinking and making sure that we do the right thing. It's the life of wisdom to some degree. But the good man, it cannot be rest satisfied in one or the other. You have to connect the two. And the chief representative of that view is none other than Aristotle's great pupil, Alexander the Great, taught by none other than Aristotle, taught the ways of the mind. He was a thinker, but he was also a man of action. Now, that idea that you can marry the two lives in one person is not new, but it becomes the Renaissance ideal. I mean, you've heard of the Renaissance man. A Renaissance man is somebody capable of both. So the Renaissance man, very much obviously in vogue in the Renaissance, didn't have to be a man, it could be a woman as well. Elizabeth was one such figure who read Greek and Latin, wrote theological treatises, wrote poetry in these languages, etc. So engaged on that level, but was also a ruler. Now, you ought to do both. You ought to think about things, meditate on them, and also act. You have to do that. The problem with Vincentio is he's a man that likes his books too much. He doesn't want to act, because guess what? Being put into the thrust of politics is messy and divisive, and people get angry at you, and you get into conflict, and it doesn't really fit your personality type. Guess what? So this type of person never wants to do this. This type of person never wants to do that. They want to get things done. They don't want to think about things. We got to act, not think. So you often find these people in conflict together. They really dislike each other. Let's just wait a minute. Oh, it's always wait a minute with you. And then this guy says, we got to act. And this guy says, oh my goodness, would you ever look before you leap? Can you not think? So you want to marry those two impulses, those two types of people. They tend to be types in one person. And the Duke here is this guy, even though he's the Duke. And the Duke has to be this guy. And he's acting like this guy. So he's an introvert. And he's a thinker. And what he's thinking now is that he's been a terrible ruler. And he's correct. So what Shakespeare is teaching us, not only in this play about the problem in Vienna, he's also teaching us about human nature and what it means to be a well-rounded human being. You have to think rightly, and then you also have to act. But he regularly depicts these people in positions of leadership and the bad consequences that ensue. Regularly, but not always. He will also portray in Macbeth this man who then afterwards regrets and then thinks about what he's done after it's too late. But you get one, you tend to lean one way or the other. But he regularly, in these plays at the beginning, he's portraying these types of figures. Yes. But no digressions. Make it on topic.
I see a really strong parallel of his character to the grand narrative of Scripture.
Sure.
I wrote, the Duke is like God in having set up good laws but allowing people to essentially self-govern and fail. Then he gives them a surrogate to enforce the law, which is like Moses and the priesthood, that is not capable of mercy and is therefore lacking. Then God comes in a form they don't immediately recognize and eventually reveals himself and enables mercy to triumph alongside the law.
Yeah, you're right. He's like a Christ-like figure then, the Duke, in this play. And he does do exactly that. So he brings in a surrogate. He brings in the person of Angelo, and Angelo screws up. We can't know Angelo is going to screw up until he screws up. The Duke does not know. There's where the analogy breaks down. God knows what's going to happen when he puts those people back. The Duke doesn't. The Duke is going to wait and see. But I think, having said the Duke doesn't know, the Duke strongly suspects what's going to happen. Because he's old enough and wise enough to know this young man who appears to be virtuous and is very zealous for no transgressions, no mercy, this is going to bite him in the backside. Why? Because Scripture says measure for measure. Watch out. Judge not, lest you be judged. Now, that's not the only statement in Scripture on judgment, by the way. Jesus will also tell us to use a right judgment. Stop.
He says it right after he's done.
He does, in fact. Yeah. Right, so don't stop judging altogether, because if you stop doing that, then you end up in the Duke's position. That's an impossibility. But make sure that you use a right judgment. Recognize that you too are a sinner and deserving mercy, and act accordingly. Be just, but also be merciful. Combine those two things. And God himself loves mercy, mercy being greater than justice. And in fact, so the play is also going to illustrate that. So it is driving us to pointing us to the Renaissance man, what we ought to be like, but the Renaissance man happens to be like Christ. So that's the extraordinary thing about the play. It's very theologically rich play in that sense. Was there anything else at the back that Common thought? I can't. Okay.
I was just going to say.
Oh, sorry, Adam.
Yeah,
yes.
That's okay. I was just going to say it reminds me very much of what Romans 12 speaks of, not conforming
to the power of this world, but rather being transformed by the renewal of your mind.
Yeah, and then later on it talks about acting each to the according of the measure of your faith.
Yes.
It gives like for those who have zeal with leadership and etc. And it talks about kind of the contemplative, but then the action that is necessary to follow after contemplation.
Yep. But these two forms of life, which we see in Greek political thought from Aristotle onward, they pass into the Western tradition and carry on to this day to some degree, although I think most people don't know about this, but they ought to, because I still think it holds true. But this is exactly why Martin Luther's father was so angry with him, because he was the firstborn son. The firstborn son is going to inherit the family estate, and Martin is the first son, and he's supposed to go and study the law and be a man of affairs. He's supposed to be a political figure. And instead a lightning bolt hits the field. He gets terrified and he retreats to the monastery, and his father's furious with him. That's what the second-born son does. And they see this then as a priority. Well, that's how the world tends to see these things. The man of action is much more useful than the man of contemplation. That's not how God sees it. God sees it both are necessary, but he also actually prioritizes this, I would say. You can't act justly until you know what justice is. You have to reflect. It's the life of reflection is necessary to a life of action. And it's constantly, it never stops being the case. The best leaders are often the people that don't stop reading, don't stop thinking. They have to. It allows them to be better at what they do. So if you're just a doer, not a thinker, then you're not a very good doer usually. Not for long anyway. So those three, I talked about the three motives. So he wants to restore order, he wants to test and teach Angelo and others, and he wants to learn from their mistakes. So enunciated right there at the outset. Let me put this back on. Unblank. Is it going to do it? No, it does. And I need to erase that. I think the comment I can make is that the Duke here shows political wisdom in substituting Angelo for himself. By the way, this is one of the major figures of the play, is this trope, or not trope, this motif of substitution. It's there all over the place. All manner of substitution. He substitutes Angelo for himself because he doesn't want to appear arbitrary and politically inconsistent, and he doesn't want to lose the love of the people. So there's a pragmatic aspect. And for his part, Angelo is an unknown character. And so he can act without any stain on his reputation or character as the just ruler, and people will accept it. I'll come back to Act 1, Scene 3, but I want to backtrack to the beginning of the play, but that it's the state of the kingdom. Act 1, Scene 3 is the one I wanted to look at, because that's the context for the beginning of the play. Let me say a bit more before we go for break then. Let me go Act 1, Scene 1. Act 1, Scene 1. Oh, can we do the entire play? Oh, I'll just do it like this. It's actually better. Why is it not working? It's glitching. There we go. Aeschylus, my lord, of government the properties to unfold would seem in me to affect speech and discourse, since I am put to know that your own science exceeds in that the lists of all advice my strength can give you. So Aeschylus is a worthy, trusted advisor. Then no more remains but that to your sufficiency, as your worth is able, and let them work. The nature of our people, our cities' institutions, and the terms for common justice, ye are as pregnant in as art and practice hath enriched any that we remember. There is our commission, from which we would not have you warp. Call hither, I say, bid come forth before us. Angelo says this to an attendant, and the attendant goes out. What figure of us think you he will appear? He will bear, rather. For you must know we have with special soul elected him our absence to supply, lent him our terror, dressed him with our love, and given his deputation all the organs of our own power. What think you of it? Aeschylus, if any in Vienna be of worth to undergo such ample grace and honor, it is Lord Angelo. Look, here he comes. Always obedient to your grace's will, I come to know your pleasure. Angelo, there is a kind of character in thy life that to the observer doth thy history fully unfold. Thyself and thy belongings are not thine own so proper as to waste thyself upon thy virtues, they on thee. Heaven doth with us as we with torches do, not light them for ourselves. For if our virtues did not go forth of us, 'twere all alike as if we had them not. Spirits are not finely touched, but to fine issues, nor nature never lends the smallest scruple of her excellence, but like a thrifty goddess, she determines herself the glory of a creditor, both thanks and use. But I do bend my speech to one that can my part in him advertise. Hold therefore, Angelo, in our remove, be thou at full ourself. Mortality and mercy in Vienna live in thy tongue and heart. Old Aeschylus, though first in question, is thy secondary. Take thy commission. So in other words, he's just vesting his whole powers in Angelo because of his good character. He's giving him a blank slate. He is giving him a full capacity to execute justice in Vienna in his absence. Doesn't go any, it's rather improbable, without any explanation. Gives him all of his power. Now, good my lord, there must be some more test made of my metal before so noble and so great a figure be stamped upon it. Thinking here like the stamp of office, like on a coin. You're gonna like, it's that easy. I walk into the room, you say, you've got it all. You have absolutely everything. What? I haven't even worked for you. You don't know me from Adam. I haven't submitted a CV. You've not observed me in any way. And you're giving me absolute authority in yes, that's what I'm giving you. Shocked. Because it, of course, is ridiculous. But it's a play. No more evasion. We have with a leavened and prepared choice proceeded to you. Therefore, take your honors. Our haste from hence is of so quick condition that it prefers itself and leaves unquestioned matters of needful value. We shall write to you as time in our concerning shall importune, how it goes with us and do look to know what doth befall you here. So fare you well. To the hopeful execution do I leave you of your commissions. Yet give leave, my lord, that we may bring you something on the way. May, in other words, where are you going? My haste may not admit it. Not need you, on mine honor, have to do with any scruple. Your scope is as mine own, so to enforce or qualify the laws as to your soul seems good. Give me your hand. I'll privily away. I love the people, but do not like to stage me to their eyes. Though it do well, I do not relish well their loud applause and aves vehement. Nor do I think the man of safe discretion that does affect it. Once more, fare you well. The heavens give you safety to your purposes. Aeschylus, lead forth and bring you back in happiness. I thank you. Fare you well. Out he goes. This is as much as that. Like an extraordinary opening scene. That impossible, implausible.
That's an awful long time saying how much of a hurry he's in.
I'm in such a hurry that I gotta go. Out I go. And he's gone. I shall desire you, sir, to give me leave, says Aeschylus, to have free speech with you, and it concerns me to look into the bottom of my place. A power I have, but of what strength and nature I am not yet instructed. In other words, he's just told Angelo that he has absolute power, that Aeschylus is his subordinate, but Aeschylus has not been told where he stands in relation to him, other than that he works for Angelo. Like, is there any check or balance? Is there any power vested in him? Well, he already knows that Angelo has absolute power, so now he needs to find from Angelo, what are you going to give me in terms of my job description? I am not yet instructed. 'Tis so with me. Let us withdraw together, and we may soon our satisfaction have touching that point. I'll wait upon your honor. Out he goes. Okay, so out he goes, and then comes the subplot. And the subplot is, as usual, there to amplify the main plot. The subplot in almost every Shakespearean play is there to, we have parallel plots going on, and they act as foils for one another. The main plot is obviously the main thing, but the subplot there is to amplify the themes that are taking place in the main plot. The subplot here directs our attention to the commoners, and with a figure by the name of Lucio, which in Latin means light, I light. Lucio, who is what they call a fantastic, a man of imagination, lives a life of leisure, and unfortunately embodies in himself the unbridled lechery of the city. He is an aristocrat or a gentleman behaving worse than the commoners. He's debased himself. He's a bit like Vincentio, except he hasn't been negligent in his duties. He's been corrupt. He's a corrupt aristocrat. And makes a reference to the French disease. Well, that's venereal disease. By the way, the French call it the English disease, just in case you're worried about.
I saw somebody who had a thing with Jesus was fresh. He's like, you guys are following the 9 commandments? 9 commandments? I thought there were 10. What? No. Let me see your list. Oh, adultery doesn't count.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so there's the English portrait of the French. The French do the same thing of the English. I think they all blame it on the Dutch as well. So anyway, there's a regular back and forth in all of this. But at any rate, he is a figure of unbridled lechery in the city. A consequence of the inaction of the Duke is that the body politic becomes diseased, the weeds come to choke out the good fruit, and injustice spreads. So we will meet Lucio and 2 other gentlemen, and we will eventually be introduced to a character by the name of Mistress Overdone. Mistress Overdone, who's a bawd or a prostitute, the head of the brothel. Yes, great name, Mistress Overdone. Anyway, I'll read a little bit of that, and we'll come back to Act 1, Scene 3 and carry on with that important section, and then we'll jump forward. So, Lucio, if the Duke with the other dukes comes not to composition with the King of Hungary, why then all the dukes fall upon the king? Heaven grant us its peace, but not the King of Hungary's. Amen. I guess the Duke of Hungary is rather fierce. Amen. Thou concludes like the sanctimonious pirate that went to sea with the 10 commandments, but scraped one out of the table. Thou shalt not steal? Aye, that he raised, as in erased it. Why? 'Twas a commandment to command the captain and all the rest from their functions. They got forth to steal. There's not a soldier of us all that in the thanksgiving before meat do relish the petition well that prays for peace. Note that they speak here in prose, not in verse. There's no iambic pentameter here. They speak in speech like commoners. You'll see that in the way it's written on the page, I think.
Yeah.
Sort of hard because the columns make it go from one line to the next anyway, but there isn't the same sort of structure anyway. Second gentleman, I never heard any officer dislike it. I believe thee, for I think thou never wast where grace was said. No, a dozen times at least. What? In meter? In any proportion or in any language, I think, or in any religion. All of this is comedy making fun, making light of the fact that none of them are virtuous gentlemen. They've never been in a place of grace. They make a mockery of grace. They're lawless men. They do whatever they please, and they're making jokes about it. Aye, why not? Grace is grace, despite of all controversy. As, for example, thou thyself art a wicked villain, despite of all grace. Well, there went but a pair of shears between us. I grant, as there may be between the lists and the velvet. Thou art the list, and thou the velvet. Thou art good velvet. Thou art a 3-piled piece, I warrant thee. I had belief as list of an English Kersey as be piled as thou art piled for a French velvet. Do I speak feelingly now? I think thou dost. All this is plays on sexual puns between them. Anyway, enter Mistress Overdone. Lucio, behold, behold, where Madam Mitigation comes. I have purchased as many diseases under her roof as come to what, I pray, judge? To 3,000 dolors a year, pains. Aye, and more. A French crown more. French crown is a gold coin, but it's also a loss of hair because of the French disease. They lose their hair because of syphilis. A French crown. Anyway. Thou art always figuring diseases in me, but thou art full of error. I am sound. Nay, not as one would say healthy, but so sound as things that are hollow. Thy bones are hollow. Impiety has made a feast of thee, because again, the effect of venereal disease is to make your bones brittle. But how? But now, which of your hips has the most profound sciatica? And now Mr. Overdone finally speaks. Well, there's one yonder arrested and carried to prison, was worth 5,000 of you all. Who's that, I pray thee? Marry, sir, that's Claudio, Signor Claudio. Claudio to prison? 'Tis not so. Nay, but I know 'tis so. I saw him arrested, saw him carried away, and which is more, within these 3 days his head to be chopped off. Lucio. But after all this fooling, I would not have it so. Art thou sure of this? I am too sure of it, and it is forgetting Madame Giulietta with child. Believe me, this may be. He promised to meet me 2 hours since, and he was ever precise in promise keeping. Besides, you know, it draws something near to the speech we had to such a purpose. but most of all, agreeing with the proclamation. Away, let's go learn the truth of it. So introduces the problem that ends up being at the center of the play. One of the problems at the center of the play is that a man betrothed has impregnated his wife. Now, I'll get to the specifics of that after the break. Because strictly speaking, by one reading of the law, there's nothing unjust. They're already effectively married in the eyes of the law. There's only one small little aspect. I think the bride price of money hasn't exchanged for some, but they've signed an agreement and so forth. They're just waiting this, and somehow that he has managed to get his fiancee pregnant before marriage, as it turns out. So that, and for that, she's going to be executed, says Angelo. Extraordinarily harsh, but according to the law, just. So there's the problem that the play is going to end up talking about here. I think I'll stop here and come back to the clown Pompey coming in to the scene, and then we'll carry on forward after the break.